Alright, first of all today we're going to get started with our Is the Earth Moving lab, and we're going to write our introduction and our methods sections of our lab report in our lab notebook. So please turn to the page assigned for Is the Earth Moving lab. And as you're starting off here, just getting to the rubric, if you look at our Desert Vista Fusion page, you can go down to where it says lab report example, and then lab report rubric, and those things will tell you how to go ahead and write these first two sections. So let's just take a quick look at the rubric. Once you open it up, you see the categories there, your introduction, and the things that you're supposed to write about, what the purpose is, you're explaining the research and the background knowledge, the reasoning behind why you conducted this experiment, and then you're writing your formal hypothesis or prediction. In the methods section, you're just going to explain the procedures in the lab step by step, not in bulleted form. You're going to go ahead and write those out in sentence form. You're going to talk about how was data collected. You're going to talk about the materials and the apparatus that were used, and then some experimental design, conditions, variables, things like independent variable, dependent variable, controls. Those are the only two sections we're going to cover today. So let's go ahead and take a look at a lab report, and we'll go over these things. So if I hit the back button here, and I hit back, and it says lab report example. Okay. As we start out here, this is a discrepant events lab that we did earlier in the year. We're just going to go kind of part by part. The introduction that we have here, it says, what was the purpose or question in the lab? And this is the discrepant events lab from early on in the year. So it says the purpose of the lab is to make observations, pose questions, and formulate different hypotheses about 5 different discrepant events. The next part of it says explain research, background knowledge, and so on. And it says here in our next sentence, starting right here, the 5 events in this lab were the floating candle, the combusting coffee can, the crushing pop can, the yellow liquid, and the balloon in the Erlenmeyer flask. So early on in the year we tested those things. In the next sentence, still kind of talking about the purpose but going to get into the research, it says the event chosen by me, the student, was the mixing of the potassium chloride or potassium iodide with the nitrate, the lead nitrate to make the yellow liquid. In the research here, it says that this was a double replacement reaction, and the indicators for the chemical change were a color change and a formation of a precipitate. Still in the introduction here, and we may continue to talk about background knowledge, but we move into reasoning behind why we conducted this experiment. The next sentence says, if the reaction taking place in the aqueous solution produces an insoluble product, that product will precipitate, forming a solid product at the bottom of the reaction vessel. So that's a little bit more in the research area. Precipitation often happens with a double replacement reaction, and in this part it says more research. One of the most dramatic and such events in this reaction is between lead nitrate and potassium iodide. Going further here into the reasoning behind we conducted selected this experiment was the selection of this discrepant event was chosen due to the extreme nature of the event and the desire to go further and understand why it occurred. And that was my reasoning for choosing this event. Now the last sentence here in the introduction is your hypothesis. And so right down here, this section would be your last sentence of the introduction. It says, if potassium iodide is mixed with lead nitrate in a glass of 40 milliliter beaker, then the double replacement chemical reaction will occur, indicated by a color change and a formation of a precipitate. So in this lab we have more of a qualitative observation and prediction, but in your lab today you're going to have more of a quantitative. You're going to measure the speed or the distance or the time or all three in your Earth is Moving lab. So in the next section, the methods works like this. We have 4 different sections. And in the method section, it's somewhere between 8, 10, 12 sentences, and we go to explain our procedures first. So in the example here, it starts out and says a pipette was used to administer 2 milliliters of lead nitrate and 2 milliliters of potassium iodide into a 40 milliliter beaker. Once the two aqueous solutions were placed in the beaker, they were swirled around in a circular fashion to mix the two chemicals. So that was my simple procedures. Yours probably will have more in this lab today. The next part talks about how the data was collected. So I start out straightforward. Right here, data was collected through observation and visual qualitative examination of the product made through the experiment. Yours today probably will be more like data was collected through distance, time, speed, and talking about how exactly, what intervals you're collecting in, how often, how much, and sort of, the exact details of units and that sort of thing. The next part of this talks about materials and apparatus and instruments, so it says that right here, materials with the potassium iodide, lead nitrate, 40 milliliter beaker, 2 pipettes, and a paper towel. And the last part of this is just going to talk about experimental design. So all the way down through here, all it talks about is the design. So in the experimental design, the independent variables were the mixing together of the lead nitrate and the potassium iodide. The dependent variable in this case, which was the observation, it was the qualitative part, it was the data we're collecting in this lab, was the color change and the formation of the precipitate. So right there, I talked about both the independent and the dependent variable. You have to do this at the end of your lab write-up. In addition to that, we want to talk about the controls. In this experiment, we wanted to keep the beaker clean from past contamination, and we also wanted to ensure that the two aqueous solutions were free from aging and that sort of thing. So that's the first 2 sections of our lab reporting. I hope this helps, and you can revisit it as often as you want on our Canvas page. I'm going to post it in this week's agenda. If you have any questions, let me know, and get started with your group.